And to Connecticut, where people still buzzing about Democratic Governor Dannel Malloy's decision not to seek a third term in next year's election. Malloy, he faced lagging poll numbers after signing off on the state's two largest ever tax increases. Now, he's a progressive, best known for pushing through gun control in the wake of the Sandy Hook shootings. Malloy saying by not running, it freed him to make difficult decisions without the worries of an upcoming election. And for more, let's bring in Neil Vigdor. He is a statewide political writer at Hearst Connecticut Media Group, including the Connecticut Post. Neil, as always, thank you.
Rich, good to be with you.
We were talking before, not necessarily shocked, but the timing, 20 months still to go. Why?
Well, again, it was kind of a surprise. We expected this more probably in June, towards the end of the legislative session. The governor had been talking about when he finally, hammered out the budget, that he was going to make a decision. The fact that he's foregoing a bid for a third term is not really surprising. There was a poll that came out earlier this week that he's the lowest rated Democratic governor in the country, with approval ratings in the 30% range. I think a lot of Democrats were looking at him as being a weight on the ticket, hurting other candidates. We have seen Republicans making up ground in the legislature. They are tied with the Democrats in the state Senate for the first time in 100-something years. They're picking up seats in the House. And so I think the kind of this slow bleed, I think Malloy kind of getting out there early lets other Democrats begin the process of exploring, raising money to try to qualify for public campaign financing through the state's Clean Elections program.
His big problem, obviously, math, and specifically, as I mentioned in the intro, two biggest tax hikes that they've seen. There's a lot of problems here that he's looking at in terms of the state's math, people leaving the state here in terms of named businesses. He says this liberates him for the next 20 months. Can he make these tough budgetary decisions? I know he's not worried about his next election, but very likely some of the people who'd want to have his job, they're in the legislature now.
Well, I think that, certainly he was going to have a lot of constituencies upset with him in this budget process. Deficit of, $1.5 billion, potentially workforce reductions, unions being very upset at him. I mean, let's face it, labor is what really helped him get elected twice, and that you don't want to burn bridges there. And so now I think he's kind of, at peace and free to do what he feels would be best to kind of turn this thing around.
It's early to write a political obituary, especially, like you said, with nearly 2 years to go in his term. That said, though, he rose to national prominence, and unfortunately, any governor's career will be defined by that awful day, and his no different that happened at Sandy Hook, and guns, and more specifically, ushering in new legislation in the aftermath. But if socially is where he even got a national reputation on this, financially, that's probably going to be a big part of his legacy too, right? Is that the math just didn't add up. Yes, he got elected twice, but he probably wouldn't have gotten elected a third time because Connecticut's economics weren't exactly what people were hoping for.
I mean, I think that there are kind of two different, sides to this. One, when it comes to the progressive issues and his leadership after the Sandy Hook massacre, that crucible, his support for LGBT protections, and last year he banned state employees from traveling to the state of North Carolina, and then taking in Syrian families in Connecticut that got him the JFK Profile and Courage Award. But then you look at the...
And by the way, it got him a seat at the last State of the Union with the president and in the first family, I should say. And he was rumored loudly that if Clinton had won, he would be in Washington right now as part of her cabinet.
So and now and then the other side of it is two of the largest tax increases in Connecticut history, losing General Electric's headquarters to Boston, is stagnancy in jobs and the economy, and so it's definitely kind of a mixed record for him.
I know you're going to be writing more about this, including for this Sunday's edition, but a lot of people have already made hints they'd like the gig. Even a Kennedy here. Talk about some of the names folks should keep an eye on.
Well, Ted Kennedy Jr., he's in his second term in the state Senate. He's from Branford. Obviously, his late father was the liberal lion, Edward Kennedy, and he's the nephew of JFK. And clearly, he's given this a hard look, and it sounds like he is, ready to make the leap into this race. I would expect in the next couple of weeks that Kevin Lembo, the state comptroller, who has bucked Malloy on some fiscal issues and some accounting areas, that he's going to form an exploratory committee. On the Republican side, you've got the mayor of Danbury, Mark Boughton. You have the first selectman of Trumbull, Tim Herbst. They're exploring Themis Claridis, who is the House Minority Leader, the first woman to lead the GOP's House caucus. She's weighing this. So there are at least probably a dozen people who are in the mix.
And when you look at some of the math that they'll inherit, you sometimes wonder why there's so much dying for the gig, but nonetheless, a lot to keep an eye on. Neil, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, members of Congress have had the week off, which means a whole lot more grief for Republicans meeting voters at town halls. We're going to spotlight some of the more rambunctious gatherings and also check in on the town hall from Hudson Valley Congressman John Faso. That's coming up next.